Walker from the Alberta Water Council, and welcome everyone to our very first Council webinar. As Aquatic Invasive Species is our most recent project selected by the Council, we thought it would be a great topic to kick off our webinar series. As part of the Council's communication strategy, webinars are meant to increase common understanding around the projects that have been selected or have potential to be selected in the future, and can also be around water management issues in general. We will have a 20-minute presentation followed by a question period. At this time, all attendees will be muted except for the presenter. I do recognize that there is a chat feature where you can type any questions, but I would ask that you keep your questions until the end and ask them verbally. With that, I'd like to introduce our presenter. Kate Wilson was recently hired as the Aquatic Invasive Species Program Coordinator for Alberta Environment and Sustainable Resource Development. She has worked on aquatic invasive species issues and management for the past several years, both in Idaho, helping to implement a prevention program, and in Florida during graduate school. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, thanks everyone for calling in. Today it's a big topic to cover in 20 minutes, but essentially we'll talk about what do we mean by aquatic invasive species. We'll go over a few other species of concern, and then we'll really focus on the quagga and zebra mussels as the most imminent threat to Alberta waters. Then we'll talk about a pilot program that rolled out over the summer and how that's rolling into a provincial program for prevention. And then we'll end on the project that the Water Council is going to be working on and how that will really benefit the program. So with that, I'm going to start. And again, if you can hold your questions till the end, I'm going to move kind of fast. So if you need clarification, maybe just write them down and we'll get to them at the end. So to begin, it helps to have a definition. So aquatic invasive species, I'll say AIS because it's a really tongue jumbler. So what do we mean by that? In order for a species to be invasive, it has to be non-native to the area or range that it's found. It can be an animal, plant, or pathogen. They're known for reproducing rapidly. Generally, there's no effective natural or native predators in the introduced area. And most importantly, it has to pose a significant risk to the economy, the environment, and or human health. In the case of the mussels, I would say all three are definitely at risk. So in terms of some other species that we are aware of and concerned about, up there in the top left corner, you see Eurasian milfoil. This is a plant that we've been talking about for 40-plus years. It's all over the West, has not been found in Alberta at this point. However, it's very easily confused with the native northern milfoil, and we really don't have a plant monitoring program at this point. So we don't have it, but we haven't really been looking is the short one on that. Very aggressive plant. It spreads by fragmentation, so that's why boat traffic, this plant will top out and then boat traffic comes through, breaks up the fragments, and you have little plants floating around starting new colonies all over the place. Underneath that is curly-leaf pondweed. Very easy to identify because no other plants have that crispy serrated edge on the top. This is found in Alberta already in limited numbers. We like to keep it that way. And again, it gets real dense and tends to crowd out any native plants. Below that, you see the spiny water flea. This is a species of zooplankton that actually eats other zooplankton, so real threat to fisheries in terms of food sources. Up in the top middle there, we have New Zealand mud snails, also found all over the West. Very aggressive, invasive snail, tends to travel on fly fisherman gear. You hear the felt waders debate on this one pretty often. Next to it there you have your jumping Asian carp. Those are silver carp. Real nasty problem in the Midwest right now. They're scared of the boat motors and they jump 8 to 10 feet in the air and can be really large. So this picture is taken in Illinois where they actually have a redneck fishing derby where it's not about catching fish but getting hit by them. So that may sound fun, but we really would like to avoid that. Down below we have the northern snakehead, real ugly looking fish. It's a food fish in a lot of Asian cultures, very aggressive predator. It eats other fish, amphibians, even reptiles. This guy can actually breathe out of the water and survive for multiple days, without being submersed in the water. And the young ones have been known to actually crawl across land to get to water bodies. So very nasty fish. We want to keep that one out. Below there we have the round goby. This is actually a native predator of the zebra mussel that was introduced from the same area by ballast water, same as the mussels. However, where it does occur, like the Great Lakes, they're not finding that it's really controlling zebra or quagga mussels at all, and in fact it's kind of crowding out their other bottom-feeding native fish. So really want to keep the round gobies out. And finally there in the middle on the bottom you have the rusty crayfish, very aggressive crayfish species. Tends to risk your native species, and it also eats aquatic plants. So pretty nasty. They're usually introduced as bait, or people like to eat them, so that is commonly means of introduction as well. And the middle picture is essentially trying to show that once these species are introduced by ballast water or aquarium or however they got there, they're most commonly spread by trailer boats and watercraft. So the species we're really going to focus on is these quagga and zebra mussels. You could think of them as cousins. Everyone's kind of heard of the zebra mussel, but the quaggas, you could think of it as the more adaptable evil cousin that probably poses more of a risk to us because they find it in colder water, in deeper water, and can handle a lot of different kinds of water quality parameters. In this photo, this is in Kansas at a reservoir. And they lower the water down, and you actually see the mussels attaching to trees and rocks and any kind of substrate there. So very, very quick reproduction, and they do tend to colonize on top of each other like that. So a little bit about the mussels. They're native to the Black and Caspian Seas. Those are large freshwater lakes, but in the present-day Ukraine-Russia area. And they were first discovered in the 80s in the Great Lakes, definitely as a result of the ballast water of a huge cargo ship. That's responsible for lots of introductions. And across the Midwest and the East, the mussels moved quickly from the 80s to early 2000s. And we're really concerned about the mussels because they can live up to 1 month out of the water. They're filter feeders. So really, the impacts go across the entire food chain because you're talking about removing the valuable nutrients in the water that pretty much feed everything down the food chain. There really are no feasible control options to date. There's a lot of research on biocontrol and chemical control, manual removal, but nothing is really working very well. So in this case, our best bet is really prevention. We're also very concerned about the juvenile form of the mussel, which is called a veliger. These guys you couldn't see with your naked eye. You would feel them as kind of a gritty sandpaper-like form. They can't live the same amount of time out of the water that the adult mussels can, but probably 5 days or so. And so that's the reason that you'll hear this message for boaters: clean, drain, dry. So if a boat is truly clean, there's no plants or mud or debris attached to it. It's drained of all standing water, and it's dry before moving to another water body. That's the best way to prevent any aquatic invasive species. So in terms of economic impacts, that's probably why we're seeing the mussels as kind of the poster child for aquatic invasives. It's not that other species aren't a huge concern as well, but these ones really have impacts on everyone, including anyone who uses power. So utility rates increasing as a result of increased maintenance and replacement costs to water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, irrigation, agriculture. Any kind of pipe in the water is really at risk here. And we know here in Alberta that our water-operated infrastructure is valued at about $14 billion. So that's a lot of money, and that does not include what would happen if we missed the boat, so to speak. Here's a photo of a irrigation pipe completely clogged with quagga mussels. This is from Lake Mead near Las Vegas, where they've really spread rapidly within a 5-year period. So they're finding them in the trillions now, and all over this massive reservoir down the Colorado River system. And so again, we really want to avoid this. We have a lot of buy-in from our irrigation districts. They have a lot to lose if this were to happen to us. Environmental impacts, again, they're filter feeders, so removing the food source for a lot of our sport fish and a lot of other species dependent on that food chain as well. They do accumulate toxins, so essentially you have mussels that are removing the nutrients from the water column, ingesting the good ones, and excreting the bad ones. So we're actually seeing now in the Great Lakes, after 40 years, they're linking the mussels to creating these toxic algae blooms that we already have problems with here in central Alberta. So definitely not a good thing for water quality over time, as well as the fishery impacts. Of course, we're concerned about our native species being overtaken. We do have native mussels in Alberta. A really important point on identification is that no native mussel in North America can attach. So if you see a mussel attached to anything, that spells bad news, and we definitely want to know about it right away. So here's my happy fish, sad fish. This is the habitat needed for a good fishery. You have plants and you have lots of different kinds of organisms, and here in the bottom corner you have essentially a thick carpet of mussels that has removed all that good habitat. So how are these species being transported? There's a lot of different kinds of vectors, and you kind of have your initial introductions coming from, again, the cargo kind of ballast water, but also you have people dumping aquariums is a huge problem. People intentionally releasing fish that they like, or like to fish for, or like to eat, or whatever. But then once something is introduced, we call that a secondary spread, how it gets from one place to another, and that by and large is going to be trailered watercraft moving from out of the province and into Alberta waters. As well, we're also looking at like firefighting equipment that we share with other provinces, any kind of construction gear used in the water, aquaculture, that sort of thing. But again, the best bang for our buck is really focusing on the boats and trailers. So here's a map of the most current known mussel infestations in North America. So essentially you see the red dots being zebra mussels, the green dots being quagga mussels, and purple being actually both species. They are finding the quagga can outcompete the zebra now, so that will be interesting to see those colors change. And really important thing to highlight here is, it looks kind of bleak, but I guess my take on it is really we have these 5 western states just below us who are really aggressive about prevention. They're doing mandatory boat inspections, they're doing regular monitoring, they have great education and outreach programs, and they've really been a huge firewall for us in terms of intercepting boats coming from the southwest U.S. where all those green dots are. What happens here in Alberta, it seems, is a lot of our snowbirds go down there. They go to Las Vegas, they go to Phoenix, they go to LA, they buy boats and bring them back to Alberta. And in 2013, we had several mussel-fowl boats that we had to respond to, and a lot of those were intercepted by Idaho, by Montana, by those places that are doing the routine checks on the highways. And again, it really does make more sense to be on the highways because we're not concerned about people who don't take their boat outside of, who stay in the province and might keep their boat in one water body or move, from one to another in the same area. We're really just focusing on those that leave the province, boat elsewhere and come back, or boats that are purchased from out of the province and are coming in. Here's just a different way to look at it. I circled the southwest there because all of those boats that I mentioned that had mussels on them that we've had to deal with in 2013 all came from the southwest U.S. So that's not to say that Ontario and Quebec aren't posing a huge risk as well. We just don't have a handle on how many boats may be coming from the east, from eastern provinces. So that is a gap that we need to address as well. So will mussels like it here? For whatever reason, we really haven't had this on our radar until recently. But the quick answer to that is yes. This map here is mussels really need calcium to build their shell. And while there are some other water quality parameters that are important, the calcium is really the biggest predictor of whether or not they could live there. So the map you see is the red dots are a high risk, so high calcium or the right window of calcium in those water bodies. Orange is a moderate risk, yellow is low, and green is very low. So the only place that you're seeing a very low risk is up in the Shield, where the lakes are quite different. But there's really not a lot of boat traffic up there anyway. So essentially what this map tells me is we really are vulnerable all over the province. There's another way to look at it there in the graph, so that's the number of lakes that are high risk, moderate risk, low risk, etc. And so what are we doing? So this is a pretty exciting time. We've managed to get a lot done in like 6 months, and we know that the highest risk is going to come from recreational boaters. We did have a pilot project that really gained momentum that started out in the Crown of the Continent area in the southwestern portion of Alberta. And it was kind of a partnership of BC, Alberta, and Montana. And I think Montana and BC both have programs now, and so I think they're looking at Alberta saying, well, you got to do something too, and they're absolutely right. We do have to do something too. So the components of a program that we're working on and the pilot project as well included awareness and information. So the sign you see here on the bottom, Clean, Drain, Dry, that's an example of a boat launch sign. So we really want to get this message out to boaters, target them where at the scene of the potential crime, right there at the boat launch, so that they remember to clean, drain, dry their boat every time. We also have on the My Wild Alberta website, we have our own page, and that needs a little work, but we're really working on it. And we're really getting out there and talking to people, doing a lot of outreach just like this. So it's a huge part of getting buy-in to have a good program. Secondly, we did some pilot watercraft inspections over the summer at 3 locations: Milk River, which is just north of Coutts border, which is where lots of those boats are coming through; Crow's Nest Pass on the BC side; and then Cardston is also another close to a border crossing. And they inspected over 300 boats. We had 6 summer students working on it, and a lot of those boats were high risk. So I think 15 to 20 were identified as boats that came from areas that had quagga or zebra mussels, so that's pretty significant. Also, monitoring and reporting, we have to know if we already have mussels. We've never looked before, so that becomes a huge part of a program. And emergency response, so if someone sees a boat on highway that has attached mussels, or they're coming through Idaho and headed to Alberta, we need to be able to respond right away. So we've developed this hotline, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but it really is kind of the go-to source of inquiries and reports. So that's a pretty awesome part of the program as well. In terms of legislation and policy, we have existing provincial, so in the Provincial Fisheries Act, we do have zebra mussels listed as prohibited, so that's good. And then I'll talk about what we've been able to do over the summer to try to strengthen that up a bit. And then federally, they're also working on adding quagga and zebra mussels and Asian carp to the list of species that cannot be imported into Canada. So that could really help us on the, boats have to stop at the border when they come through. They can't come when it's closed. It's really an obvious point for catching any fouled boats. So here's just some photos of training that we've done over the summer. We've really targeted fishery officers, but we've had attendance from our own GOA staff, municipalities, irrigation districts, watershed groups, First Nations. We figure we've probably got about 300 people trained over the summer, so that's pretty awesome too. These are photos of our boat inspection station locations, and we use info centers at on the highways, but in the future maybe commercial vehicle stations or something. We're just kind of playing with locations at this point. But so far those ones were pretty good. Here's a map from Idaho showing where the boats that have come through their stations came from. So this says to me boats are coming from everywhere, every Canadian province, every U.S. state, and we need to be ready to deal with that threat. So in terms of monitoring, we were able to add monitoring both for adults and juveniles to existing water quality monitoring efforts. So that's over 40 water bodies just in this summer season. So far we've had no positive hits, so that's a really good thing. Next steps would be looking into other options for analysis, adding boat traffic data, because really a risk is higher on the lake, even if it's a moderate calcium level. It's higher if there's a lot of boat traffic, right? Because that's where your boats from out of the province are going to be headed. We also really want to work on building partnerships and trying to figure out a way to start doing aquatic plant surveys so that we know, do we have Eurasian milfoil? So that would be a good step. Here's a flow chart of what happens if you call this number starting yesterday. This is pretty exciting. This is actually going now to the radio control center. It's the same type of system as the report a poacher. So that means they triage it. If it's an inquiry, it goes to me. If it's a report or an emergency, then those operators can immediately dispatch an officer on call, a fisheries officer. So that is a really huge step for a long-term sustainability. In terms of policy, we do have Eurasian milfoil in the Weed Control Act. And again, like I mentioned, we have zebra mussels in the Fisheries Act. We've also managed through this Section 32 to get a ministerial order out. And this means that any fishery officer can respond and has the authority to stop, inspect, clean, and if necessary, quarantine any mussel-fowl boat that has quagga or zebra mussels on it. So that's a really huge thing that we were actually able to get through in a matter of months. So pretty awesome. And here is the ministerial order. All of these officers listed are authorized under that MO, and so we'll be going back out in the spring, probably trying to get more training for these guys, although we were able to hit a lot of them over the summer. Okay, so on to the project that the Water Council has chosen and how that can really add value to the program we're trying to develop. This is brand new. You know, it's kind of scary that we're one of the last ones to develop a program, but it's also positive in that a lot of other jurisdictions already have really good programs, and we have a lot to learn from them. So doing a jurisdictional review of other jurisdictions is going to add a lot of value to developing a brand new program to see, you know, what has worked well, what has not worked well, what would work in Alberta, what would not work in Alberta, and what can we really learn from those programs that have been working for a while. Also, I see this as a real opportunity to build partnerships. This can't just be a GOA led, you know, we can lead it, but we really need the buy-in and the partnerships to figure out, you know, how to really make this happen quickly and how to sustain it over time. So whether that's doing a survey or an inventory of possible partners and what role they could play, I see that as a really valuable aspect of the project. Also, the project team is comprised of pretty diverse representation. So I see it as a sounding board for the ideas that we have for the program development. And, you know, out of that jurisdictional review and survey of internal partners, there will be recommendations. So that is a really, really positive project for us. So just to wrap it up, we are facing huge impacts, huge costs to the province, and the best thing we could do is prevent it from happening. And it is preventable with a robust program and buy-in from all of you. We have had lots of high risks in 2013. This is not a hypothetical situation. We need to work on, you know, decon equipment. This is hot water that we use to kill the mussels. We're working on all kinds of protocols in that regard, and we've got to have that emergency response. So having the hotline is a really good, strong part of our program right now. So we have the Water Council project. We're really working on this province-wide approach, how best to utilize that MO. So if all those fishery officers have authority, what's the best way to make sure that we're looking at boats and we're going to catch the ones that are fouled. So there's a lot to do on that front. What partnership opportunities do we have, and how can we get boat inspections at ports of entry? So those are all the things that are on my mind right now. And with that, it's not that people are maliciously spreading these around. They just don't have enough information. 99% of the boaters that we deal with that do have mussels on their boat, they don't know about the issue. Nobody wants to be responsible for something like this. So it's really an education opportunity as well. And with that, feel free to write down my number and email, and Meredith will facilitate the question period.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Okay, so for questions, on the attendee panel, on the top left-hand side, there's going to be a little symbol of a hand. Now, if you have a question, please click on that, and I will unmute you, and you can ask your question. Again, please do not type a question in the chat section. I'd like to keep all the questions verbal because we're recording this, okay? Thanks. Okay, Carolyn Campbell.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Could you just redisplay? There was one map that flashed that I think the timing was a little off on, and it was just talking about the risk predictor factors. It was right before that AIS pilot program map.
This one?
Yes, thanks.
Sure, you bet.
That one just didn't flash on. Okay.
Okay. So
can you give a brief summary again?
Okay, so our internal ESRD limnologist put this map together based on calcium levels in Alberta lakes. So it's showing what level of risk we're looking at all over the province for the different water bodies. Red is high, orange is moderate. So lots of those water bodies are at high or moderate risk.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, John Skoronsky has a question. I will be unmuting you. Go ahead, John.
Hi, everybody. Very good presentation, Kate. Thank you very much. One question, is the focus of the Water Council project, is it strictly on mussels, or is it broader than that in terms of the expected outcome?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So again, we have been focusing on the mussels because it's kind of provided the best impetus to get here. But no, it would be bigger than that. And in fact, one of the real exciting parts of the jurisdictional review that maybe I'm a geek, but is coming up with those kinds of questions to ask those other jurisdictions. And they can include things like, what's your criteria for listing species? So you can't just like throw a pile together and say, oh, well, you know, these are bad ones somewhere else. Like we really need to have a methodology and criteria for choosing. So no, it will be bigger than just mussels.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, it looks like we have no more questions. So with that, I'd like to thank Kate for her very informative presentation. And I would like to thank all of the participants for attending our first Alberta Water Council webinar, and stay tuned for future webinars. This is also I've recorded this webinar, so I'm hoping to be able to put this on the Alberta Water Council website. So if you are wanting to see it again or send it to any other people, then that would be great. So thank you very much, and this webinar is now complete.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you guys.